Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Great to see you, Jack.
Good to see you. So we are watching this political showdown between Texas Republicans and Democrats play out. And this is obviously a very political process here over these newly drawn congressional maps. But this is personal for you because your district, the 33rd Congressional District here in North Texas, is going to change very dramatically under the new map. Right now, obviously, you're in Tarrant and Dallas counties, but under the new map, you would only be in Dallas County and you live in Tarrant County. So talk to me about this new map.
Yep, that's right. I live in Fort Worth, not far from where you actually work, and so obviously that is a little problematic for me. I'm going to be looking at all options as far as which congressional district I can run in. So I'm not taking anything off the table, but I think that what Republicans are doing right now, firstly, is disgusting. There was a flood that we had in Central Texas that needs to be solely addressed, and then you should move to other topics. There's no way that that flood should be on the same call with redistricting, because when you talk about redistricting, you can't get around it. It's about race. It's about politics. It is about the worst of the worst when it comes to how we govern our state and how we govern ultimately our country. And the fact that they would put it on the same call, I think, is just despicable.
Let me ask you, because you said all options are on the table, and I wanted to ask you, what are you considering? Because this would become a majority Hispanic district, and do you worry that if you run for that, you're going to face a serious primary challenge? Or, where else would you consider looking to run?
Yeah, not really even thinking about that right now because honestly, I'm focused in on this fight. I'm trying to push back against this discrimination that the Republicans have put into this map, this blatant discrimination. I'm worried about the neighborhood that I grew up in Fort Worth. My family grew up in Como and in Stop Six, and while I get along well with my Republican colleagues that would represent parts of East Fort Worth, they're not going to want to represent the community. They're never going to be seen. Phil King, who's in the state Senate that represents Southeast Fort Worth, Phil King grew up over here. Phil King also grew up not far from where your station is headquartered. Uh, he doesn't come out here and do any events because he doesn't have to. And so the neglect and the racism that are drawn into these lines is the thing that really worries me the most. I got a YMCA reopened in East Fort Worth that was sorely needed for that neighborhood. And there is no way that any of my current colleagues would put in for community funding grants or community funding projects in the appropriations bill that would do something like reopen a YMCA. And then the other thing that I don't like too is I don't believe in changing the rules in the middle of the game. You draw the lines at the beginning of the decade, and there's a reason why the lines should stay the same and why you shouldn't redistrict every 2 or every 5 years. That's pure insanity. Then the reason why the line should stay the same is that there should be a consequence. If the leader of your party is acting like a fool, like Trump generally does, and their policies are unpopular, then the voters have an opportunity to rise up against that. But if you keep changing the lines every 2 years, then we basically have a monarchy, something that our founding fathers were trying to get away from when they said that we would do a remuneration once every 10 years in the Constitution.
So we've seen the Texas House Democrats. They went to Illinois. You were up there. They went to New York. They went to Massachusetts. They are going to California. And so why is that so important that the Texas Democrats are doing it? Is it because, I mean, these other states are now looking at whether they redraw their congressional maps to try to neutralize whatever Texas does to boost Republican efforts. Is that right?
Right, exactly. And I'm glad that they're visiting these other states. I'm glad that they're breaking quorum. It's important to visit these other states because these governors need to redistrict, even if they have to push their primaries back. They need to redistrict. Our country is at stake here. And what Donald Trump is doing, he wants to not have any consequences for the big ugly bill. He doesn't want to have any consequences for Trump tariff taxes. He doesn't want to have any consequences for his abuses in ICE. And so as a result, he's trying to rig this election to where there will be no consequences and he can keep on doing business as usual for the next 2 years. And simply just letting him do that and not answering is a big mistake. One of the looking back at 2003, and I was a staffer for Martin Frost at the time, who ultimately got redistricted. And the big mistake that blue states made back then is that when Tom DeLay slapped the Democrats and drew those seats out, we should have punched him right back in the face, and we should have drawn one or two states and done mid-decade redistricting. It was crazy not to do it back then, because basically what we've done is told someone that, in 2003, that we didn't have any heart and that we lacked heart. And when you let people know that you lacked heart and you won't fight back, that's when the bullies pounce. And so now they're back 20 years later doing mid-decade redistricting because they still think that we lack heart and we won't fight. And so we absolutely have to fight. I don't give two spits if these primaries in these states and these rules have to be changed through special sessions. Because if you let Trump get away with this, and they're already talking about doing it in Florida, and you've seen how crazy DeSantis is, he's going to want to show that he's part of the crazy kid club. He's going to want to do that, and that he is going to redraw in Florida just so he can show his bona fides. They're already talking about doing it in Missouri. I have no doubt they're going to do it there. They're only going to get one seat there, but they're going to do it. And so instead of, talking about it, we need to be about it, and we need to punch back and show them. Because what's going to happen ultimately is that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, the question is going to be asked within his conference. They're going to say, do you care more about your incumbents or do you care more about President Trump? And what kind of man are you? What sort of man are you that you won't tell him no and not protect your own incumbents? Because the name of the game is obviously picking up seats. That's what the NRCC and the DCCC do 24/7. But being a leader, being the minority leader, or being the Speaker of the House, you also have to have a commitment to the incumbents in your conference or caucus. And right now, when it comes to looking out and having the back of his members in his conference, Speaker Johnson absolutely has no spine at all. And he is a servile, subservient yes man when it comes to Donald Trump. And he is turning his back on the people that pay dues into the NRCC because they're going to get their asses redrawn out this time.
So Texas Republicans I've spoken with say, look, they are doing what Democrats have done historically, which is all their states, they say, are totally gerrymandered in the Democrats' favor. And so Republicans say they are catching up and doing what Massachusetts and New York, Illinois, and California have done historically. And they say, look, Trump won a majority of when you look at the 16 counties that touch the Mexican border in Texas, 13 of those went for Trump in this last election. And so they're saying those, by redrawing the maps, that they are reflecting what the voters wanted. And so what do you say to that?
First of all, and that's been one of the frustrating things, it seems like every media outlet around the country, quite frankly, and they always call it the liberal media, which I think is laughable, because one of the things that I'm hearing is that same line. But again, here lies the problem, and that's the greatest lie ever told. We're talking about redistricting in the beginning of the decade. And so if they want to play that game, if you look at the growth in the state of Texas, we got shorted. Democrats got shorted in the 2021 redraw. And we got shorted also in the 2011 redraw. If you look at the growth in this state, which has been Hispanic, South Asian, and Black. That's why Texas is growing. Texas isn't growing because of white population flight into our state. But yet the Republicans keep giving all the seats to majority white voting districts.
But
And so
the
and so
Republicans,
absolutely, so it's no compare mid-decade redistricting and redistricting at the beginning of the decade is absolutely no comparison. And then if you want to look at how the lines were drawn in 2021, D versus R, I can show you examples in Florida. I can show you crazy examples in Arkansas. I can show you crazy examples right here in Texas. I can show you crazy examples in Oklahoma. I can show you crazy examples of lines that were not compact and not neatly drawn, so it was to favor the Republicans, but it was done at the beginning of the decade, which is when you're supposed to do that,
so
not in the middle of the decade. So there's absolutely no comparison. I think that's dumb, quite frankly, when Republicans say that, and all they're doing is trying to confuse people.
and I hear what you're saying, but as far as what the Republicans say is, look, when you talk about the growth, and obviously we've seen the growth certainly with the Latino districts, Asian Americans, African Americans in Texas, but Republicans are saying the trend is towards Republicans, especially when you look at the Latino community, when you look at the 2024 election. So that's what I'm wondering. They say it's Democrats don't want to accept that truth.
If you want to talk about how the maps were drawn in the beginning of the decade, and Republicans' failings with voters in those maps, then they need to look at other strategies on how to address that. Mid-decade redistricting is not how you address that. They drew these lines. Republicans drew these. I didn't draw these lines. I had no say so at all in drawing these lines. Republicans drew these lines the way that they wanted to. And now they have an unpopular president, and you should not be able to draw the lines in the middle of the decade to reflect that. It has nothing to do with how well they did in the 2024 election. As former President Biden used to say, that's a bunch of malarkey. They are unpopular right now, and so they are trying to change the rules in the middle of the game so they will not lose the majority, and that is wrong. And now, if they want to talk about some things that they could do to address that other than redistricting, then let's have that conversation. Maybe they need to move away from Trump and stop being so servile and subservient and afraid of him. Why are they yes sirring him and on bended knee to him when he's unpopular? Maybe they need to move. Maybe they need to vote against the big beautiful bill and show the American public that they are not in lockstep with him. And so that's what you do. And or when you're not doing well in the midterms and your president is taking you down, you show ways that you differ from the president. You don't just redraw the lines so you can keep trying to game the system. Because again, if we start going down this road to where you start redrawing the lines every time the system is gamed, then we've really moved closer to a pre 1787 model to where basically a monarchy is running everything. You don't want to do that. There's a reason why we have elections the way that we do. We don't want to emulate places around the world that are dysfunctional and crazy and keeps letting one person stay in power repeatedly.
We will leave it there. Democratic Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jack.